Hello everyone, my name is Dee Dee Butler and I'd like to welcome you to today's training webinar, Drill Hole Planning Basics. Your host today is Maureen Moore. Maureen is a geologist with our Technical Services Group and provides consulting and training services in the North American region. A few things before we get started. First, today's webinar will conclude with a question and answer session, so please feel free to write questions in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Also, you will receive a link to a recording of this webinar by email in case you'd like to see it again. It will also be available on the Maptek website at a later date. I'll now hand it over to Maureen.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Hi, I am Maureen Moore, and as Dee Dee explained, I am a geologist working with Maptek Technical Services here in North America. If you work here in North America, you might have talked to me on technical support or have taken one of my courses. I am a professional geologist for about 10 years, and prior to working with Maptek, I studied economic geology and worked as a field geologist planning drill programs for exploration, development, and environmental targets. So let's get started enough talking about what I've done in the past. Let's talk about the exciting process of planning drill holes. As you know, it can be really exciting, but also kind of overwhelming. You have a lot of different types of data that you're wanting to include, as well as a variety of different drill programs that you might be in charge of planning for, such as exploration, infill drilling, geotechnical. The main goal of all of the different types of drilling is going to be to quantify and spatially identify the commodity or your target. The other aspect is you can plan a beautiful program, but realizing that not every drill hole you're proposing will actually get the funding or will be appropriate to be drilled. So being able to have enough grit to say, hey, these are all the different drill holes I want to plan, but also working with your stakeholders to identify what's the potential decrease or increase in economic value for that deposit and hopefully move that to the next stage. So today, the main topics that I'm going to cover are to help alleviate some of the stresses and struggles that the geologists planning drill holes have. One is digitizing in 3D. So a drill hole in Vulcan is going to be just a 2-point line, but digitizing that truly in 3D can be a little challenging. So we'll talk about how we can get around that with some shortcuts there. We're going to talk about how to import planned drilling into a database, how to reposition an existing proposed drill hole, how we're going to export the data that we're proposing to our drill program and from our drill program to our drill team and management. And then also throughout the process, we'll talk about how we can utilize scripts to streamline the planning process. There are a lot of different options in Vulcan. This is drill hole planning basics, so we're going to go over some of the basic functionality. If you are a previous or a Vulcan power user, you will be familiar with a lot of these tools. I'm just packaging them in a new fashion, so feel free to stick around and make sure you keep an open mind and you might learn something. So let's get started, enough chatting, and go into the live demo. So whenever I get started, at the end of the day, I usually start my day off today off of what I've done yesterday. So to help with that process, I like to use the file save screen at the end of yesterday, and then use the file load screen to load up the data that I was working with. So for today's target, we're going to be looking at some chemistry data, some surface samples. I also have some scripts to help speed up the process of loading some of the other data. For this project, I'm going to be looking at the same block model with the gold values. So I'm going to use a macro under File, Macro Create to follow along in the menu options where and how I'm loading up that model. The same thing for my exploration holes. So at this point, we can rotate around freely and take a look at our data. One of the first things that always comes to my mind is, where am I actually looking? So I use the Effects toolbar tool, Draw Directional Dial, to help me understand where I'm actually looking, as well as the transparency tools down here in the visibility spheres to see through that surface to make sure I understand where I'm actually trying to target. Okay, so rotating, obviously digitizing a two-point line can be rather easy, but doing so in a rotational view can be a little challenging. So what I usually try to leverage out of the tools in Vulcan is going to be the functionality where we can speed up the view create section. So for this purpose, I usually use the view create section 2 points. So I've actually made a macro to help speed that up, skipping a few clicks there so that I have more time to figure out where I want my drill holes. So it's going to ask me to pick that first plane, and I have a couple fault surfaces and an ore body, and then the existing drill holes here to make sure that I'm not re-drilling in the place that I already had. So you can use the view create, lots of different options in the create section. We just added section definitions, which allow you to set up a predefined list of sections, which we just had a webinar on, and it's available on the Maptek users area as well as our website. So for today, I'm just going to use our classic tools, but for sure the section definitions will help with this process. Okay, so I'll zoom in and you'll notice a couple of things that I have already on my toolbars that you may not have. The one in particular is the slice toolbar here, which can be toggled on and off from the toolbar shortcuts here. The other item you might notice is that I have my triangulation is a different thickness from the front and back. Starting in Vulcan 10, we actually added the ability to control that a little bit easier with different types of data. So if I wanted to increase or decrease what I see in the back view, going forward here, versus the front. So that way it'll help me identify where I might have some drill pads that I can use to help with the prep of the ground prep work. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is set up a couple different views that I like, that I see where I'm going to have a target piercing. So I know this is a really good view right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my temporary views. We get 9 different temporary views within Vulcan. To set this view, I will use the Shift key on my keypad and the number 1, because that's my first screen that I'm going to be looking at. So if I were to set my view back into the plan view and then press 1, it navigates me back to that view. So that's really helpful because you can see where this might be a potential target. I want to cut through these areas. I don't have any drill holes that pierce this specific orientation, so maybe these faults are actually bringing in some more gold that I'm just not aware of. So let's get digitizing in 3D. So I will use the Design Create Features tool because it will allow me to actually generate a layer for all of my planned drill holes on the fly, already set up, the colors, the line style, everything. So again, it's going to save a little time using features, which we also just had a webinar on. So now it's going to ask me to pick the first point, which will be my collar point. And right now, if I use the indicate, it's going to snap into the section that I'm in. But I want to actually snap onto the object, which is going to be my topo there. So I can say, maybe I want my hole to be right here. Okay? I'll go back into my section. Using the N short key on the keypad, I can toggle between the different views, or sorry, the different snap modes. And then I will snap right there. And then maybe I want to advance a few. And maybe I want to go ahead and use that same position there. Oops. Go back in here. Again, I can make some shortcuts as well to help with this process. And I have a few other views that I have already set up that I want to go and add some additional plans for. And you'll notice that one hole was off. I didn't snap onto that object. That's okay, because we're going to come back to that one for some of the other data that we're looking at. Okay, so for now we want to save where we are, and we've digitized. Obviously that is not the end-all be-all for digitizing in 3D, but just a couple of tips and tricks that can help you throughout that process. Okay, the next thing is I have a couple other drill holes that I've already planned that are supposed to be helping kind of validate some of the other drilling that we already have. So with that, we have some new exploration holes and validation holes. We need to make sure that our naming of the drill holes are going to be consistent and not just be called polyline. So through our property editor, which you can access on the top left where it says show and hide your property editor. So I can come in here and just type in, the name of the drill hole. Or if I have more than a few, I probably don't want to do that manually. So I can go to Design, Attribute Edit, Attribute Editor. Right now I have them in 2 separate layers. This is my new one, and these are my other validation holes. And you can see that we have some of them, they're just kind of a hodgepodge of some of these. Okay? So what I can do is I actually already have in a CSV file there, I have some naming conventions and some targets that I was looking at. So I can come through here and say I want to copy and paste, because you can always type it in, but it's sometimes easier just to copy and paste if you already have a naming convention and know which drill hole is supposed to be targeting which ore body. And you can do that in your description here or in the group. Clean that up, press OK. And so now when I select that, it'll have an update naming and then the target that I'm supposed to be, that drill hole is supposed to be targeting that ore body. And lots of different ways of organizing your data for later use. But for now, we'll move on to the actual part where we are actually gathering the information about that drill hole. So we know where it is in 3D space, but a lot of programs you need to share the XYZ position of these, as well as the bearing, plunge, and the bearing and the dip of that drill hole. And we can use, I see a lot of people using the Analyze Details Full tool, where we go ahead and select the drill hole, and then it will populate in our report window the length, and you can also use some of the other, it'll report the length, but you can use some of the other tools in Analyze Details to gather the rest of the information. But that can be a little cumbersome, and if you are not paying attention, you could be collecting the wrong numbers, and there's a lot of room for error there. So what I like to do is I prefer to convert all of these into a Drillhole database, which makes more sense to do if you have more than a couple. So let's go ahead and import all of those. First thing we need to do is go into the Geology Drilling Open Database and make sure that we're in the right database. Because right now, if I added them, that would be for my exploration data. So I want to include them in my planned drill hole database. Okay? The next thing we'll do is go to Geology Drilling Utilities. We're going to take those 2-point lines, those objects, and convert it into a drill hole. And it will give us an option to assign the object name, which we're going to select this time. You can also prompt for the name. But we just took all that time to make sure that our object name matches our drilling name that we want. So we will use that one. And we will add these, and then add these. Oops. I picked that drill hole there. So when we add those, if I added those again, just pick these, it's going to yell at us and say, hey, you've already have this naming. So there is some some options here to do a validation and make sure you're not creating duplicate hole IDs. So I could just come in here and say I want to replace that existing hole and make a new one, or override that, or supply a new name. But we're just going to cancel out of that because we don't want to overwrite those. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is go in and take a look at the information that we create out of there. So if we go into Maptek ISIS, you'll see that we have all of our information in our collar and survey. So we'll leave that there for a second. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about how now I have these existing holes, how can I move them? So maybe for this one I wasn't quite on that surface there, or this one I might want to move it a little bit. I know I need to validate this hole, but I might want to drag that a little bit over to the right to match it up where that hole is. So I can do that by loading these drill holes as these objects that are now drill holes. And I will remove the ones that we have. So we don't want to mess with our exploration holes. Those are been validated. These are our planned drill holes that we are going to be working with. And we do want to remove our holes there. And then load those up. We're not going to use gold because they're planned, so we don't have any data there yet. But we can use the total depth field to display the trace of our planned hole. See. Oh, let's see. So let's take a look at our legend here. So you can see that we are going to be using the to field and the field name as our total depth. Okay? Okay. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is actually reposition those holes. So if we go to Geology, Drilling Utilities, Reposition Hole, it'll give us an option to move the points. So we'll select that hole and say that I want to change that collar position to snap onto this hole here. Move and drag it underneath. And then the other option we can use is to drag that entire hole. And if we save this, close this out and reload it, it will move them there. Okay? So in between the dragging or moving the points, you can reposition those holes and it will update live to the database. Okay? The next thing that we might want to do is some people like to apply a hole deflection for the data that we're looking at. And for that, we want to make sure that we have our depth field for both the survey and the collar. So a lot of people like to keep their total depth in the collar field, but we will need to have the depth in here for the survey so that we can apply a deflection to that data. So with that, we can actually use the utilities script function that I have prepared for you guys. And it's a simple script where we have our collar total depth. As long as it's greater than 0, it will be added into our survey depth. So we'll go to utilities script run. It's going to open up this script. We do have this database open as a read-only, so when we modify it, we want to close it. So it'll remind us, please close it. It will populate our T-shell here, run that script, and now if we go back into that survey, it will add the TD information into here. So now, again, if you want to go ahead and add that deflection, we can do that using this script, which is available in the Maptek users area. Or if you want to use it with us, just give us a call on technical support and we can help you walk through with your data. So we're running close to the end of time, so I won't be running through this fully, but I do want to give you the options on how this is used and just talk about how we can use the Lava scripting functionality to speed up and customize your workflow. So the whole deflection insertion, what database do you want to actually go through and update? So we would be looking for our planned. And then what hole do you want to use this on? So right now, this script, it was meant for just as a one-off if you have a hole or two that you need to add a deflection. Obviously, if you have 10 of holes at one time, you would probably want to modify this a little bit to allow for more than one hole. But say I have a hole that you know a specific azimuth or dip you want to apply a deflection with, and you know it's going to be on the left side of the drill hole or right, and if it's going to be flattened or steepened. So you could use this script that was customized to help with that process. Okay? And you can do that per one. But we'll just do that first one. Okay, so at this point we talked about how to digitize, how to gather the information. The next part is, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I have everything I need to present my planned, my drill hole. So whether that's for exploration holes or if that's for validating your existing drilling for QA/QC purposes. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go back into ISIS because a lot of people would prefer, instead of going through and manually grabbing all of the information from the Envisage Analyze details, you can go into ISIS and use the utilities export tables to export the database so that we can put that into our budgets. And you can also separate these all out by, for this example, we're going to export everything. But if you have a specific table that calls out what the different targets are, that was one of the things that we talked about in the planning stage, or maybe you're naming your drill holes by the different programs, you can use that to customize the extraction. Perfect. So within our editor, or our CSV editor here, we can open up to see what we have with our collar and survey information. So you'll notice that you have all of your information here. If you want to add additional, maybe you want to change the depth or the inclination or anything, you can do that right here. Okay, but now we can send that off to our team and make graphs on total depth, add your costs. And the other nice thing is that this kind of gets you going for those management or your team members that you want to share your drill program with, but that are numbers based. So if they like to see the numbers, this will help you get them the numbers. For those people that would prefer to see the actual view, or where's your topo, your target, your planned drill holes, we can actually use the file export 3D PDF to do that. So you can pass that on to your team, the CSV information, and you can also export a sample or the layer. You can export the drilling for the drillers or the management. So that way, if they don't have Vulcan, or if they are traveling and they don't have access to their Vulcan, they can still review your data. Okay. And so this acts as a 3D viewer. You can do some slicing, and I think we even have some videos on the website that goes into some of this as well. And if not, if you have any questions, you can let us know, and we can help you with that 3D PDF creation and use. Okay, so with that, we'll summarize what we've talked about in this webinar, and then if you have any other questions, we'll have a few minutes for that. So to summarize, the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the ability to use the new sectioning and existing sectioning tools for section definition or your temporary views to help you make the digitizing process a little bit easier. It's very valuable to digitize and plan in 3D, but it can be a little difficult. If you want to organize all of your data, you can convert all of those individual objects into a Drillhole database. And after that's been in a database, you can do a live link where you can reposition the holes. Finally, within the workflow, you want to use your macros whenever possible to speed up those repetitive processes. And the most important part is actually to make sure that you can share your information and be able to articulate why that drilling is so important and how that's going to add value and potentially reduce risk for your deposit. So with that, we will take any questions.
Thanks, Maureen. As I mentioned before, please write in any questions through the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Let's see if we have any so far. What if I have a geologic surface I want to make sure I drill past? Is there a tool that can help with that?
Good question. They must have had that question already ready to go. If you have a specific surface that you want to make sure that your drill hole is piercing, there's a couple of different ways that you can do that within the geology tools, but the most automated way is actually found in the drill and blast tool. Within the way that they set up and drill, they usually use a surface to make sure that they are passing. So I have actually been using some of the drill and blast tools in that effort of making sure your drill hole pierces that. And if anyone has more questions about that, please feel free to email me and I can show you using our tools with your data.
Great, here's another one. Is there a tool that I can use to just extend the distance of the drill hole?
Yes, actually, there's a few different options there. The one way, if you don't need to see it in the 3D viewer, you can just add it right in ISIS in the edit mode, or you can use a tool in the design menu under Design Object Edit, Move by Distance. And that'll allow you to shrink or extend that drill hole pass. So actually, those questions, maybe those two people, if they want to have a brainstorming session, they might actually be doing the same thing. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Maureen. It looks like we're nearing the end of our time today. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact Maureen directly or email support@maptek.com. We hold a different webinar each month, so please visit maptek.com to view the entire schedule. On behalf of the entire Maptek team, thank you for attending and have a great day.